Hello and welcome to this week's tutorial presentation on the concept of assessment. Last session we talked about what assessment is and why it is so important. This session we will further expand on this concept of assessment by identifying and categorising the different types of assessment. So what do we want to achieve by completing this topic? Ultimately, we want to understand and appreciate that there are differing types of assessments. But how are we going to do this? First, we are going to revise our knowledge from last week, which was defining what assessment is and recognising the importance of assessment to the teaching and learning process. Then, we are going to identify and categorise the different types of assessments that we can use in our teaching practice. So how are we going to do all of this? Well, let's look at the scope for this tutorial. We will begin with revising what you already know. You will be provided with an optional activity. If you are confident with your topic knowledge at this point, then you are not required to complete this activity. However, if you are still struggling to grasp some of these concepts, then I would highly recommend you pause the video when instructed to. Then we will identify the different types of assessments. Here you will need to complete a compulsory activity. You will need to pause the video when instructed and follow the directions on the slide. Your response to this activity will demonstrate whether you have or have not achieved the required learning gains. After you have completed this activity, record your response on Blackboard and return to the tutorial where we will move on to categorising the different types of assessments. Again, you will be required to pause the video, complete a compulsory activity, record your response on Blackboard and then resume playing the video. You will then have the option to complete an extension activity. This is not compulsory, however it will prepare you for your assignment 2, which is to design an assessment task that assesses learning in your specific KLA. Please email me your response to this activity so I can give you individual feedback. Finally, we will summarise what we have covered today and link this to what we will be learning next session. Let's get started. By this stage in the course, you should be able to define what assessment is and recognise the importance of assessment to the teaching and learning process. So what is assessment? Well, we know from last session that assessment is the juncture at which we add data to our teaching and decision making. It is a process of collecting evidence to demonstrate what our students have learnt, what is the extent of this learning, and how will I structure my future teaching programs as a result of this evidence. Assessment is important because we have a legislative responsibility to assess student learning. It allows us to make informed teaching decisions and ensure we are demonstrating evidence-based practice. It enables us to report to the student and stakeholders on their progress. Optional activity. In your own words, define what assessment is and why it is important to the teaching and learning process. You may now pause this video and record your response to this activity on Blackboard. Alternatively, you may continue with the tutorial. From written exams to dance performances to attitudes towards learning, there are a multitude of ways we can assess our students. However, there are 4 main groups that describe the assortment of assessment types. These groups are tests, product assessments, performance assessments, and self-assessments. It is important to consider the knowledge type, that being procedural or declarative, that you are assessing when choosing one of these types to ensure you are applying the best fit assessment. For example, If you were assessing a student's ability to hit a ball with a bat, you wouldn't ask them to sit a written exam. You would take them out to the field and assess their physical performance. This would be a performance assessment. Compulsory activity. Read the article about assessment types and then identify one example of best fit assessment from each of the 4 groups that you could use in your own key learning area. Remember, the 4 groups are test, product assessments, performance assessments, and self-assessments. You must now pause the video, complete the activity, record your results on Blackboard, and then resume the tutorial. Now that we have identified the types of assessments available to us, we can begin to categorise them. We categorise assessments by considering their purpose. The 4 categories of assessment are profiling, formative, summative, and diagnostic. Each of these categories have a different and specific purpose. Profiling assessment occurs prior to instruction and is used primarily to inform teaching plans. By ascertaining the current student cohort's attainment levels in readiness, we can develop an appropriate curriculum. So, remember the online quiz I asked you to complete at the beginning of this topic? That was a profiling assessment that I used to ascertain your current knowledge levels of this topic and thus inform my decision as to where I should begin teaching. If I had assumed you all knew what assessment was and the importance of it before beginning this tutorial, there are some of you that might have become disengaged because you wouldn't understand the content. By conducting a profile assessment and then presenting this data in a cohort identification table, I was able to identify a teaching starting point for this tutorial and identify the need to cover revision of prior learning. Formative assessment is conducted during instruction. We conduct formative assessments to provide students with feedback that is intended to enable improved performance on current or subsequent tasks. To put this simply, we check in to see how our students are going along the way and to help them achieve any required learning gains they may have missed before we reach the end of our instruction. For example, once you begin to post your responses to these activities in this tutorial, I will be able to conduct formative assessment whereby I can give you feedback, identifying the areas of strength and of weakness in your response. There are no pass or fail grades in these responses, only areas of success and of improvements. This is formative assessment. Summative assessment occurs at the end of instruction and leads to an awarded grade or determination that contributes to the overall grade for the unit learning program. An example of a summative assessment in your learning program would be Assignment 2. This assignment occurs at the end of Module 2, leads to an awarded grade of fail, pass or credit and so on, and it has a weighting of 30%, meaning it will contribute to your overall grade for this unit. This is summative assessment. The final category is diagnostic assessment. Diagnostic assessments are responsive to results. This means that when assessment data demonstrates a student or students have not made the required learning gains, diagnostic assessments are necessary. These assessments ascertain why students have not achieved. An example of a diagnostic assessment can be seen in the unit feedback survey that you will have the opportunity to complete at the end of this unit. You might write that you have trouble navigating Blackboard. The information was not presented clearly. The assignment descriptions were too vague. From these comments and feedback, I, as the teacher, would ensure to make the appropriate amendments to the learning program to ensure these issues are minimised and everybody can make the required learning gains. This is diagnostic assessment. Compulsory activity. You are now going to list at least 10 assessments that you could use to assess a student's knowledge in your key learning area. You then need to identify the type of assessment this is and categorise the assessment according to its purpose. You will present this information in a table and share it on Blackboard. Here is an example. Let's think back to this earlier scenario. When a student is being assessed on their ability to hit a ball with a bat, we can identify this type of assessment as a performance assessment. And if we assume that the teacher does not yet know the student's ability level, that meaning he has never seen the student perform this task before, we can categorise this assessment as a profiling assessment. Why? Because the teacher is assessing the student's current level of performance so to decide where he should begin his teaching. Pause this video and complete the activity. Extension activity. Remember, this activity is optional. With consideration to everything that was discussed in today's tutorial, you will now design an assessment task to assess learning in your key learning area. Be sure to identify the type of assessment this is and categorise it according to its purpose. If you complete this activity, please email me your response, and remember, this will help you immensely when you begin working on assignment 2. You may now pause this video and complete the activity, or continue with the tutorial. So let's summarise what we have learnt this session. Well, our ultimate goal was to understand and appreciate that there are differing types of assessments. We achieved this by revising what we had learned last session, which was defining what assessment is and recognising the importance of assessment to the teaching and learning process. We then identified the 4 types of assessment, which were tests, product assessments, performance assessments, and self-assessments. And we categorised different assessment types into 4 categories: profiling, formative, summative, and diagnostic. Next session, we will be looking at various assessment techniques and when to apply them. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Next session, we will be looking at various assessment techniques and when to apply them. Thanks for watching. and see you next time. Next session, we will be looking at various assessment techniques and when to apply them. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.